Hello, welcome everybody. Thank you for your patience. We were just giving it a couple of minutes for people to roll in and join us. I know that it was a little challenging to find the Zoom link within the document that was shared. Thank you all for being here today. I really appreciate the interest that you're showing in this opportunity. We are very excited. I know it's thinking out a little bit to think about what you might be doing in FY22, but it's pretty interesting to be able to get ahead of the game a little bit in terms of knowing where we'll be at that point in time with what'll be going on. So today we're going to talk about, Darcy, could we go to the next slide? You know what, actually, before we go to the next slide, let me give you a couple of housekeeping. Well, we can be here, it's fine. A couple of housekeeping to let you know everybody's camera is turned off and everybody's microphone is muted. And you can see there's closed captioning at the bottom of the screen if you need it. The other thing that I would share with you is that we do still have a chat function that is available through the Zoom. And so if you do have questions, please go ahead and put them into the chat function and we will address them as we may. So, so we can go forward one now. So these are the topics that we'll be discussing today. We have an hour and a half set aside, as you may have seen. I am not sure that we'll get through all of that, but we will have some time at the end after we have covered these topics to do some Q&A and to address the questions that you have in chat. But feel free to put questions into chat as we go along and we can address them as they arise. And on my team, if there is a question that has come up in chat and I'm ignoring it, please feel free to interrupt and say, hey, we need to address this. So the topics that we'll cover, I'm going to give you, I think most of the people on the call are pretty familiar with PI-CASC and with the CASC network, but I will give a little background for those of you who may not feel quite as familiar. We will also discuss the eligibility criteria, which can be a little confusing, and hopefully we'll bring those things to light. We'll talk about the funding details for this particular request for proposals and share a little bit of the timeline. Then we'll discuss both the research priorities that we are addressing in this RFP, as well as how we came up with those research priorities. We will also cover the evaluation criteria, which I know everybody is curious to learn more about. How do you decide who to fund? And then a little bit about how PI-CASC looks at how our science approach in the region, how we would like it to look. And then I think we'll cover a little bit on anticipated deliverables and the statement of interest submission steps and the follow-on steps that will happen after the statement of interest stage, because I know that everybody needs to be able to plan ahead in case your statement of interest does make it through the first round. And then, as I said, we will have the FAQs that will follow. So can we go to the next picture, Darcy? So for those of you who are not as familiar with the CASCs, or for those of you who would like a refresher, this is the current map of the CASC network. There are 9 of us, and the reason that you had to wade through a nearly 100-page document to find the link to be able to attend this webinar is because we're doing a coordinated release this year. So all of the CASCs have put forth their research priorities into that document, and we are all following the same funding cycle to move those priorities forward. I will note that it is theoretically possible to apply to do work in other CASCs other than our CASC, but just as we discourage people from the University of Florida from being the lead PI, nothing against the University of Florida, just picking somebody at random, to be the lead PI on one of our awards here within the PI, we similarly would like most of our applicants, if not all of our applicants, to be from our region, because we would like to support our region, and that is how the majority of the CASCs feel. However, there is the potential to do cross-CASC research. So if that is something that does interest you, I'll cover it a little bit through this talk, but it may be something that we should talk about a little bit further. And so I invite you, if you're interested in doing, say, something between the Pacific and Alaska, or the Pacific and the West Coast, or the Pacific and the Caribbean, that you reach out to us to discuss it so that we can identify the best path forward for a project like that. Next slide, please, Darcy. So this is the CASC network mission. This is what binds us all together. Even though our regions are very different, we are all committed to delivering science to help fish, wildlife, water, land, and people adapt to a changing climate. And we do so by focusing on actionable science. And we'll discuss actionable science a little bit later on. But the idea is basically that we look to try to identify partnerships and scientific research that will lead to impacts that improve the capacity to adapt to climate change. Thank you. So this is our region, and we are, as I said, bound to the national region as well through the ideas that I just shared with you. But we also are committed to regional concerns. And these have been found out through a number of stakeholder engagements and through, I guess, regional conversations and collaborations. You see here that there are reports that we have done to bring people together to identify what the research needs are here. You can find the science plan, which is the one at the top, this photo, I can't point to it, but the photo at the top on our website, and you can look at the science priorities that have been identified for the region. That report will be revamped in the next year or two to reflect the changing concerns in our region. The other thing to know about the Pacific Islands Climate Adaptation Science Center and all of the climate adaptation science centers is that we operate as a consortium. And so that is one of the reasons that it can be a little confusing the way that these sorts of awards work, because we are not the USGS directly reaching out and funding people through USGS funding mechanisms. We actually work with our host institution. It's a competed award that it comes up every 5 years. And we work with our host institution to help disperse funds through the region and connect scientist managers and scientists to scientists and managers to managers as well throughout the region. And I think we can go to the next slide. So our goal is to develop science, but also to develop other knowledge products and syntheses. So it is, as everyone on this call, I'm sure, is aware, become more apparent that science is not necessarily the only driving answer that can provide objective and logical and experienced information to be able to lead to problem solving, the concept of Western science anyway. So that's why we have other knowledge products to consider, as well as syntheses between science and these products and/or science and other sectors of society, but all towards the point of developing the capabilities to support the systems that we all share and value, which are the human and ecological communities and systems that support the flora, the fauna, the ecosystem services, and the people that are part of our ecosystems across the Pacific Islands. So now, for the moment that you guys have all been waiting for, we're going to get into the eligibility criteria and move into some of the meat of this award. So the eligibility criteria, this is where it gets a little confusing, so please feel free to ask questions. So we are partners, as I mentioned, with the University of Hawaii at Manoa, and then we are also partners with the University of Hawaii at Hilo and the University of Guam. And so those are our host and our consortium partners. And anyone who is affiliated with those three institutions can be a lead PI on the award. Similarly, anyone who is a USGS employee can be a lead PI on an award. But parties from other organizations may also participate in this funding opportunity. They may receive funding as a co-investigator through a sub-award. So if you are from a party that is not mentioned above that line, which is somebody who works with those universities or is a USGS employee, then what you need to find is a partner who is. And then that partner can be the PI on the award, and you can receive a sub-award or a contract or an interagency agreement through that partner. The host university will be the way that all of the funds are dispersed to the consortium institution. So if you're a USGS scientist, the money will not move from us to UHM to you, it will move directly to you. But if you're a non-USGS employee, then it will need to move through the University of Hawaii at Manoa and then move on to your institution from there. Do we have any questions that I am missing in the chat? Are we good to go?
There's one question, Mary Vaughn.
Oh, and Heather, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I believe that graduate students can be if their institution approves of that.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, we've run into this. So different departments will require that you have a different level of recognition within your department. And so it is possible that a graduate student or a postdoc can be the lead PI, but you have to work it out with your department, right, Heather? It's the department.
Yeah, Mary Vaughn, that's correct. As long, for us, our goal is to make sure that the funds that we send to the University of Hawaii from USGS can actually get to the individual who applied, who serves as the PI. So as long as your institution has a way to get you those funds and they agree to that, then that's fine with us.
Thank you, Heather. I should have mentioned in the beginning that I'm the director, but of course, being the director just means that you get to give presentations like this. The people who are doing all the work behind the scenes include Heather, who you just heard from, who is the science coordinator, as well as Darcy Yogi, who will be posting any of the links that we need and has been instrumental in setting this up and putting the slides together. And we also have our consortium partners that we depend on heavily. Rachel is part of making this whole magic work, and Brad Romine, I think, is on the call, as well as I think Scott Larson. So it really does take a team to stand this up, and I'm appreciative to all of them and apologize for not giving you guys the props that you deserve in the beginning of this talk, but I appreciate your help. So we can go to the next.
There's one other question, Mary Vaughn.
Okay.
Thank you for that, though. And if the question is, I guess Jim Beats sort of answered that. Wait, okay, UH System Community College. I think you will need to partner with someone at one of the consortiums, Manoa or Hilo, to be so it is a little to serve as the lead PI, but you could still serve as the research PI. That just means that there will be a lead PI within the University of Hawaii, Manoa or Hilo system that will need to be able to set that transfer up for you. So yes, you would need to partner with somebody to be the lead PI if you're at one of the community colleges.
Yes, and Darren Lerner, who will be the person who manages the pass-through for the University of Hawaii at Manoa, may also be able to answer questions such as that. And Jim is also on our team, so thanks, Jim. Thank you, Heather. Okay, funding details. We anticipate that we'll have about $450,000 available for funding in FY22. However, the budget is a changing landscape, and it's possible that with the new administration that we will actually have more funds to use in the coming year, or theoretically, we could also have less funds. But this is our anticipated amount based on our past budgets and our current obligations to other PIs. The idea behind the award that we're putting out here, I think in a second, it's actually a couple slides down, but in a second, we're going to get to what the science priorities are. But one of the things that we were really trying to do with this request for proposals is to reach out to the outer islands. All of the awards that we gave in FY20 through the RFP process, FY21, were to Hawaii. So the majority of our money has been going to Hawaii, and we really were trying to reach out and to encourage our partners in Hawaii to potentially reach out. But we'll get into that in a little bit. But that is our geographic goal with this funding opportunity. So we also were hoping that the project awards would not exceed about $200,000 for the life of the project. I will draw your attention to something that may or may not be obvious, but it's something that I experienced in our last round of RFPs, which is if there's only $450,000 available and everybody asks for $200,000 in their first year, then we can only fund 2 awards. So if you really do need $200,000 in your first year, then that's one thing. But if you're actually doing it to get all the money up front, then I would encourage you to budget your time and money in a responsible way throughout the project so that we actually can fund as many projects as possible and try to get everything moving as best we can through the region. So the projects are also tend to be 24 months in length, but you can have a 30-month length project or a 12-month length project. We tend to not exceed 36 months. We are hoping to be able to fund 5 to 8 projects, but again, that depends on what people come back with in terms of their funding needs in the beginning of their proposal. So I will just say that we are hoping to be able to fund smaller individual awards, and with their particular emphasis on new, emerging, or rapidly evolving climate adaptation issues, and I would add or syntheses. So those I think are some of our priority areas as well. Next, I'm going to do the timeline, and we released this award announcement on February 9th. There was a national level RFP webinar yesterday, and then ours is today, and then in about a month, we'll have the deadline for the statements of interest. The reason that we did this so close to the release date was because, as you'll see, the way that PI-CASC works and the way that the majority of the CASCs work, the proposals really require a fair amount of legwork ahead of time, rather than just having sort of a theoretical concept that you can throw out and say, hey, do you think this will work? There's actually a lot of relationship building and understanding what your partner's needs might be related to proposing a project within the CASC construct. So the deadline for statement of interest is March 19th. Then we have about a month that we'll review them. And then those of you who are successful will be notified that your proposals are going to be requested to be a full proposal. Those of you who are not, we are happy to give you feedback about your proposal so that you can potentially craft a successful proposal in the future. And then you have May, June, July, you have about 3 months to write your full proposal, and then we will review those over the next couple of months, and hopefully we will have our response back right before the end of the fiscal year about who will be funded for FY22. So could we go to the next? Thank you. So this slide is a little confusing, but if you look at the yellow rectangle that I outlined, this is where we are in the process today. So this is what we're talking about today. If you are successful and move into the next stages, then we can start talking about the other aspects of what this entails in terms of interfacing with the bureaucracy that is federal government funding. But today we're just talking about identifying who might be PIs, those PIs creating statements of interest, and then those will be submitted to the RFP manager, and then you will either be invited or not to move forward with the full proposals, at which point we will be available to discuss full proposal development and other aspects with those PIs. Next slide, please. So these are the research priorities. As I mentioned, what PI-CASC would like to do is to focus on the US API in how we are moving our money this year. So the first one is managing novel systems, and managing novel systems is basically recognizing that climate change in concert with other anthropogenic factors is transforming ecosystems. This is transforming ecosystem composition, structure, function, the ecosystem services, the actual footprint of the system. Forests are migrating. And then natural and cultural resource management approaches to climate adaptation tend to prioritize this idea that we can perpetuate current systems. But it's emerging that current systems and their associated benefits may not be the best decision in all cases. And there may be times that it really is important for managers to understand that their best option is a managed retreat or accepting a chimeric type of system, and how to manage those emerging systems in the face of climate change. The second science topic is agroforestry. And agroforestry is basically the idea that humans can use systems that are a semi-natural system to be able to develop agricultural benefits, but also to continue to enjoy many of the ecological services that more natural ecosystems provide, such as biodiversity, erosion control, and similar services. So that is our second topic. And our third is freshwater security solutions. This is not simply putting stream gauges out, although that could be an important part of your project. Understanding freshwater security is something that broaches all aspects of society and nature. So it's understanding that the fish that are in the estuary require freshwater security, as well as the school children who live on the same island, as well as the farmers that live on the same island. So understanding how to create security solutions that are cross-sectoral and that benefit the fish, wildlife, and people in the systems that we're trying to serve. The fourth topic is biosecurity. Biosecurity is a strategic and integrated approach to analyzing and managing relevant risks to human health and ecological securities, to include wildlife, plant life, soil health, agroecosystems, and associated risks for the environment. So biosecurity is basically based on the recognition of critical links between sectors and the potential for hazards to move within and between sectors. This topic, I'm sure everyone is aware, has gained a little bit more traction across the US government with the emergence of the coronavirus. But there is definitely a lot of space to think about vectors and some of the other biosecurity issues related to the human-wildlife agro interface. And then the last one, and for those of you who are joining us from the state of Hawaii, and you may think, why am I on this call? Because everything is focused to the outer islands. This may be a real opportunity for proposals from you guys, which would be island-to-island technology transfer. So looking at the role that effective regional and global response to climate change challenges can be transferred to people, and understanding some of the challenges in that, not just do they have topobathy data, but also, how do I need to approach different communities to be able to help build some of the sustainability and solutions in those communities as I've built them in mine. So those are our 5 science topics that we would like to focus on within this. And I will pause again to see if there are any questions related to those or not. And if you guys need to think about questions, I know everybody moves towards things in their own time. So if you want to push till the end, we can still discuss it at the end. It's not something you have to get out right now. Okay.
Mary Vaughn, I'll pose a question, and that is if you can select more than one topic for your proposal.
Yes, you definitely could select more than one topic. And then I think that we're going to get into it later in the talk, and it's not something I necessarily encourage, but you can also put forward 2 proposals, one at each topic. I will also say that although we have these 5 topics laid out, those topics may not all be funded. We may end up getting, a whole slew of proposals in one subject area and end up funding that subject area predominantly. So it's not like choose the least popular and you'll be sure to get funded. I would go with what you actually have the acumen to research and to build the relationships in. Okay, so I mentioned actionable science and I mentioned co-production, and I'm not going to really get in depth here. There have been books upon books written upon co-production. There are courses taught about actionable science. I mean, there's a lot of information out there about what actionable science is and what co-production is, and how it actually works, and whether we need to parse definitions and whatnot. I think I can break it down pretty simply to you to understand what it is that PI-CASC is looking for in the proposals that we get. We have limited amounts of time to help develop plans that will create sustainable systems for the ecosystems that we all value out here. So the science that is being developed through PI-CASC funding needs to be science that can lead to action. That doesn't mean that it's going to be the final answer, but it needs to be something that is going to move the conservation of these systems forward so that they can adapt to changing climate and uncertainty. Co-production, in my experience and in how I see it within the PI-CASC context, co-production basically means being aware of who may be using your science, how they may be using your science, or if you're a manager, being aware of the limitations of science, being aware of how you might best use science to inform your efforts, and then entering into that conversation with each other so that expectations are set at what can actually be achieved and what can actually be answered and what we can actually move forward through this sort of engagement. I would also say that within PI-CASC, I consider some of the capacity building to also be a co-production aspect of PI-CASC, because I think that all sides are interested in wondering how are we going to manage this together moving forward? How will our next generation be able to manage this as we pass the baton on to them and say, here are the solutions we came up with, and we hope that you can build off of them. And then the third aspect that I would say that I really like to see be a part, and this is, you can see it's all connected. I mean, that's what the figure, that's why I'm not reading the figure to you, because the figure that you can see there is everything is connected and it's all iterative. It feeds back and forth amongst the different components. But that's the community and stakeholder engagement. And so one of the weaknesses that I have seen in past proposals is when people say, and this is what I'm going to do for my research, and then I'm going to brief the Park Service. And that's really an ineffective way of creating actionable science, creating lasting relationships with Park Service employees, creating a stakeholder engagement where they will be willing to work with scientists to develop more applicable answers to management needs. Did I see that there was a question before I move to the next slide?
Yeah, there are a couple in the chat.
Okay. Is the plan to only fund the islands beyond Hawaii, or will Hawaii projects still get funded? So that's sort of a catch-22, Helen. The intent is to increase capacity and to push funding out to research on the non-Hawaiian islands. However, that doesn't mean that researchers on Hawaii or from Hawaii will not be funded, because Hawaiian researchers can partner with managers and or scientists and or students from or on the outer islands to be able to push that forward. So we are not planning with FY22 RFP money to push money to research actually funded on Hawaii, unless it could be something that complements ongoing research in the islands. So you could have developed a tool in Pohnpei that you're testing here or something similar. I'm not ruling it out fully, but no proposal that is only looking at a Hawaiian context is going to be funded. Also, could we use a previous successful PI-CASC grant application as a template for starting work outside of Hawaii, or do you want to see projects originating in those islands? I think I just answered that, but you can use previous successful grant applications as templates. But again, I would like to see those outer islands engaged with in this round. Okay, can we move to the next slide? So the statement of interest and proposal evaluation criteria, you actually don't need to worry about the right column right now because we're just working at the statement of interest stage, but because people are often interested in the next stages so that they can plan, we went ahead and put that into this slide. But the two biggest areas to think about when developing your statement of interest is the applicability to one or more research priorities, as I listed previously, and engagement of stakeholders to create actionable science, and then the scientific merit and quality of the research, and then the CASC specific criteria. So theoretically, the engagement of stakeholders in actionable science will be meeting people's needs in the region as identified by your partners or by those of you who are driving the partnerships, right? So that is how that will be working. Can we move to the next slide? So because it was a, I guess a fairly unusual RFP in the sense that we were focusing on a geographic region, and we're all hoping that travel will be possible by then. There was some concern that people raised early that, you know, maybe the awards are too small, or maybe there's not opportunities for Hawaiian scientists or Hawaiian managers to be able to participate in PI-CASC in the way that they would like to in their region, because many of us, of course, are committed not just to our local conservation, but are invested in the entire Pacific region. And so we came up with some ideas. You can find these in the request for proposals, but these aren't like, be sure to include at least 2 of these in your application and it'll be an award. These were just sort of ideas to get your juices flowing in your brain about, you know, what is it that that I could do that might be a little bit outside of the box in terms of doing research or building connections or furthering technology transfer and relationship building. I'm not going to read through those because you guys can find those in the RFP. And then the SOI submission. So this is also in the RFP, but I was just going to go over it briefly. It changes every year a little bit, and then it changed a little bit this year because of the joint release from all of the CASCs. But the majority of your SOI is to provide the information on collaborations, engagement, and the actionable science outcomes, with just a small portion at the beginning to look at project administration information, and then you have a page to summarize your project, plus adding a budget table. This will end up being a 2-page proposal, and then you can add the budget table after the 2 pages. It doesn't have to be part of the 2 pages. We do ask that people try to adhere to the 10-point or larger and 1-inch margins just to keep everybody communicating within the same amount of space, because actually, I'm sure you all know this, but it really is part of the competition as well, is to be able to actually communicate what your interests are and what your capacities are within a set amount of space. And so please do adhere to those. Next page, please. Please don't wait until the last minute. So as you guys know from being out here in the islands, we are not on DC time, and Washington, DC is where the RFP manager management sits. So if you wait until the last minute, you will not be able to submit your proposal. We had a number of people in the previous RFP who actually missed their deadline literally by minutes because they waited. So please don't be that person. Please go ahead and log in the relatively near future. Make sure that you can navigate around RFP Manager. If you have problems with it, please reach out to us. We'll be happy to help you try to figure out what is going on. Sometimes it does have glitches and sometimes it does get hung up. Heather often interfaces with RFP Manager, so I would ask you, Heather, do you have anything else to add to that?
I do not at this time. I'm definitely happy to help you as you navigate it. It's a, you know, once your statement of interest and all of those all of the details that Mary Vaughn just mentioned that go into the statement are complete is when you would need to make an account and upload it. So I guess one thing to say is one of the reasons it takes a while is not just to upload your information, but you need to set up an account, and all of that is in the RFP also, but sometimes it takes a little while for them to approve your account for you to actually be able to go in and upload. If you have experienced any problems, just let me know. My contact's all over the place. So thanks.
Thank you. And I think we can go to the next slide. So this slide gives you the link to where to find the funding opportunity. And it is, like I said, it's a large document because it includes all of the other funding opportunities across the CASCs, but I hope you'll have fun. It'll be some light reading to look at what the other regions are doing, but it does have easily navigable index to be able to find where we are. And please feel free to reach out to Heather or to me with any sort of questions, and we'll be able to get you answers as soon as possible. So now I have a number of frequently asked questions that we will post both the presentation that I'm giving now. So if you have colleagues that you said, oh, I'll go take notes, but I wish that you could be there. Now you can tell them that they can just go to the website and sit through the 45-minute talk as well. So this will be recorded. There's also a recording of the national level CASC presentation that was given yesterday by the Northwest CASCs to be able to talk about some of the national level concerns. And then, what was the third thing? You can always reach out to us. The FAQs that I'm about to share, which will be in this recording, will also be posted separately as frequently asked questions on our website. And as you guys send in additional frequently asked questions, we can add those to the list so that we can address them for you and your colleagues in the future. So let's start with frequently asked questions. And again, whatever you might want to ask in the chat is more than welcome. So one question that we get is, do potential applicants need to contact the host university leadership when you're applying prior to submission in order to be considered? And the answer is no, but the consortium leadership, which are the universities, would often like to hear from you so that they can be prepared for this. So we don't require it, but we do encourage it. And we also encourage it in terms of you understanding how you might do some of the pass-through costs and budget preparation for the institution. So our second question is, I am not a USGS employee, but I am a federal employee. May I apply to this opportunity? And the answer is, federal interagency researchers need to partner with consortium members or with USGS researchers to be eligible. So you can also look up eligibility questions for further information on the website, but we're also happy to talk to you further. We have in the past disqualified some federal employees who tried to apply to this not without a USGS or university partner, because those are the requirements for the RFP. Are there specific guidelines for who can be co-PIs? No. They're not. So if you would like to have co-PIs with an NGO or with a state agency or with a municipal agency or a other special interest group, wherever you may be, they may be co-PIs. Do you have any questions about eligibility before I move on? And again, if at the end you have additional questions, we can move on to them.
Hey, Mary Vaughn, I'll just
Yes.
add in there that usually if the co-I, is a major part of the project, they serve basically as a subaward to the lead institution. So there's definitely still eligibility for you to be a huge part of the project and receive funds. It's just a matter of the way we're set up to move those funds. So yeah, just think of yourself if you had to partner with an eligible PI, that you would basically be the subaward on the proposal.
Yeah, and to flag something that, and Heather, you may have to set me straight on this, but to flag something that is a little bit confusing to people, and it's not going to be relevant to everyone, but to prepare you, If and when you got to the point where you were going to be funded, then there is this weird loophole that USGS CASCs use where Darren Lerner, who is the consortium partner, will actually be the quote unquote lead PI on the award. However, you will have a research PI who you would traditionally think of as your lead PI. That research PI will continue to function as a lead PI, but according to the USGS paperwork, they will be partnering with Darren Lerner as the lead PI. This is purely a bureaucratic issue. It does not reflect anything about him being involved with your project or him taking on any sort of traditional PI roles. I just want to flag that so it doesn't come as a surprise for those of you who get to that point. So we can move to application and proposal. I addressed this earlier. May I submit multiple proposals? And the answer is yes, you may submit multiple proposals. And the rule is basically just follow the steps in RFP Manager. You'll submit separate proposals to separate RFP Manager entries. However, if you are interested in doing, let's say, the Pacific Islands and Alaska partnership, do not submit the same award to the Pacific Islands and to Alaska. And unless you note that that is what you're doing through an email to us, and then we may actually say, could you do it this other way? And honestly, the CASCs are still in discussion about how to handle many of the cross-CASC awards. So if you are interested in applying to a cross-CASC award, that does not increase your chances of funding. It does not decrease your chances of funding. But if it is something you're interested in, please do reach out and we'll figure out the best mechanism for you to put that proposal forward. The next question is, how should we provide an example of co-production? So the answer that we've provided is that an acceptable example of co-production will demonstrate that your team has an understanding of and experience with co-produced activities. So if co-production is something that is new for you, that is okay. It's just something that you need to demonstrate that you understand and that you intend to use as an engagement mechanism throughout the development of your research. So the real trick about co-production is it's something that happens before, during, and after the project. So even when all PI-CASC funding is gone and done and over with, theoretically, the relationship that you build between a scientist and a manager will continue, and that co-production will continue to move forward the impact of the work that you have done together. So are in-kind contributions required? No, they are not required. We simply ask that they be noted so that duplication in federal funding can be avoided. Can co-PIs be included later when the subcontracts are worked out? It's typically fine at the statement of interest stage that not all of the co-PI and partnership details are worked out. However, if you are in discussions with particular groups, it's typically fine if you just mention that you're speaking to DOFA, for example. You don't necessarily need to say who your contacts are. Okay, so the application and proposal slide, we're going to move on to a funding slide, but I just wanted to open it up in case there are questions about these aspects. Okay. So funding. This is always a big question, right? Who will be the reviewers for the statement of interest in the full RFP? Each of the CASCs, so the reason that I keep bringing it back to what the other CASCs might be doing is because there are other opportunities to apply to the other CASCs, but they each do have slightly different review processes. If you're applying outside of our group, then I encourage you to reach out to the directors in those regions and or the science coordinators in those regions to discuss this concern if you share it. But generally, the reviewers that we use to review these are scientists and resource managers who have relevant subject matter and technical expertise. We often sometimes use CASC network staff, or since Darren Lerner, who is our partner in the consortium, has Sea Grant network staff, we sometimes use those. Of course, the reviewers follow standard conflict of interest approaches. So if they know you, they can't do the review. And we don't have any of our immediate consortium partners. So The contacts that are listed, Darren Lerner, Jim Beats, and Romina King, will not be sitting on reviewing panels. So if you reach out to those contacts at the universities, you can speak to them openly, but it's not going to improve your chances of being funded, or you can speak with them openly and it's not going to diminish your chances of being funded. If you are, to flag this for you also, if you are invited to submit a full proposal, we are going to try something new this year, which is that we will ask you, since you are the subject area expert, to provide us with contact of potential reviewers within your field, so that we can reach out to people. We ran into an issue in the previous RFP where we had people who, the easiest example is modelers, right? Where you have people who are used to using a theoretical model, and then you have somebody else who is using a numerical model, and you have numerical modelers reviewing analytical models, and they disagree about models in general, and so the proposal is not reviewed properly. So we're trying to avoid those sorts of conflicts with this one by opening up the floor to the proposers to provide potential reviewers. So the next question is, if a project is selected for funding in this competition, when will the expected start date be? So that is a difficult question because, of course, you're working with the federal government, and there's no direct answer that I can provide you in terms of when they will actually be moving us a budget this year or in FY22. There are a number of factors that do influence this. What I can tell you is, if you move through, so the stages of this RFP, the way that it will work is, we have this now, we're going to do the SOI, and then we're going to do the RFP, and then those of you who are invited for the full RFP, a subset will be selected for full funding. Those of you who are selected for full funding will work out a couple of final kinks. Usually there are kinks at the very end. And then we basically put you on a list that said, if and when the funding comes through, these proposals will be funded. It is not a guarantee of funding because the government could shut down and the money couldn't move, but you are on the, as soon as we get the money, it will be sent out the door to you list. Do we have any other questions related to funding? Okay, we can move on to reporting and requirements. These things actually have nothing to do with your statement of interest application, but it's just so that you're aware of what you're getting into in terms of determining if you want to be able to apply to this award. So we went ahead and included this information, such as what are the project reporting requirements for CASC Research Awards. So the majority of our awards that we give are agreement awards that allow PICASC to continue to interact. It kind of comes back to the co-production concept. So we will continue to interact with the researchers and the managers throughout the award period. The reporting requirements is, in addition to the federal financial report, which is typically required for external agreement administration, there are other forms that are required. As you can read here, it basically becomes bureaucratic, but we also require annual progress reports, and they are required at 60 days prior to the end of the budget period, and then final reports 90 days after the project completion date. But any of you who have been funded in the past or know people who have been funded in the past, you know that we are highly interactive and really like to learn more about what you're doing. Not really because we're nosy or trying to keep tabs on you, but because what we're really trying to do in this region is build synergies across groups. And so if you have moved something forward, or you're looking for a partner and we can find another partner or find a place to move something forward, then we like to be able to connect you with those people. So the next question on reporting and requirements is, where can I find out more about my data management plan requirements? So this is something that you would actually submit at the full proposal stage. And you can follow that link. It shows you where to go to find more information about the data management plan development. So I think with that is our last frequently asked question. So if your question was not addressed in those frequently asked questions, please feel free to put it into the chat. Or if you don't want to share with everybody else, please feel free to reach out to us through email. But I do encourage you to ask it now because you're probably not the only person wondering about it. And I also then, while you guys are thinking about your questions, open the floor to Heather and or Darcy if there's something you guys would like to add. Feel free.